Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is September 3rd, and right now we're looking at the mid-level water vapor loop. You can see the upper level low that's been bringing us our thunderstorm activity for the last couple of days. This is going to continue pushing off to the east as we go through the day today. And then we've got the next weather maker here, this big ridge out here that is being driven by this deep low pressure center out over the Gulf of Alaska, amplifying the ridging. We're going to take a look at how long that's going to last, and we'll take a look at the extended forecast to see when the next cool down or when the next system will be coming. Taking a look at yesterday, if I go back and forth here, you can see that line of showers and thunderstorms there across western Washington as the upper level low pinwheeling across the southwest Oregon coast. Upper level low starts to eject inland, and you can see all the thunderstorm activity across the Washington Cascades, British Columbia, Oregon, eastern Oregon. A lot of lightning strikes, hundreds of them, and that extended up into Washington as we went through the afternoon and evening last night. You can see some pretty good thunderstorm development for the east slopes of the Cascades as well. Some of that wraparound moisture there and some convergence along the higher terrain. And then we scroll on in towards this morning, and it did pick up some thunderstorm activity here across, portions of I-90 out towards Spokane, Ritzville. Didn't drop a lot of rain, but, noteworthy. And you can see the thunderstorms still ongoing as we are currently across Idaho, Montana-Idaho border, and the Oregon-Idaho border there as well. So taking a look at today, you can see the system is going to be keeping that thunderstorm activity off to the east today. There is a wind and a hail threat with some of that activity. And if we take a look at tomorrow, that activity continues to push off to the east. They're including some of eastern Montana. But then we're going to start ramping the temperatures up here across the Pacific Northwest by that time. Taking a look at the SPC storm reports, we actually did get some pretty gusty winds. Check it out, 65 miles per hour, Baker, Oregon. And they even give some comments and some descriptions on what went on out there. We had some big trees down across portions of Idaho, and check it out, 63 miles per hour there, the ASOS at Boise, KBOI. So yeah, we did verify some of the severe thunderstorm threat out there yesterday. Now taking a look at today, this is the high resolution rapid refresh. It did pick up on some of that shower activity here, but it wasn't earlier. So, these models, all the models really have a hard time with these upper level lows and that elevated convection, and they tend to overproduce. And that was the case with this one. As we saw, we brought thunderstorms west, Cascades, and east, and we're still dealing with it as we speak right now. But as we go through the day today, you can see some fairly robust storms there across western Montana, some prolific lightning producers, wind and hail threat with that, but that is going to be pushing off to these, and we're really going to warm things up here. Potentially one of our last heat waves of the year as we start to get into September. It is that time of the year where we start getting towards fall, and we're going to start to bring those temperatures back down. More on that here in a moment. But if we take a look at the European as of last night, there's our upper level low swinging through and the ridge building in the wake of that. You can see Wednesday afternoon tomorrow, look at that ridge just square over the Pacific Northwest. It continues to move through, and it'll eventually start to get out of here. It looks like by the time we go towards the end of the weekend, as we've got somewhat of a trough and potentially a weak system starting to approach the coastline as we go on into Sunday night. We'll be watching that one day by day as well. Now, if we take a look at what's going on about 5,000 feet above us, I'm going to put this into motion, and you can clearly see the anticyclonic flow, the ridge building, very warm temperature, some offshore flow here across the region. So this is going to allow us to warm up quite significantly as we go towards the end of the week and on in through at least the early part of the weekend. But then you can see as we start to go on in towards Sunday night, the cooler air out over the Pacific Ocean, likely bringing some onshore flow at this time and starting to cool us down a bit. So taking a look at this is mean sea level pressure. What I want to show you here is the ridge building. You can see how the high pressure kind of shifts inland. And what do? We go from high to low, and you can see a little bit of a thermal trough here. Very subtle features, these thermal troughs, but that's going to bring some offshore flow, some compressional heating. And on a bad note, it's going to introduce some of the fire smoke, especially across Oregon, back into western portions. More on that here in a moment. I know you guys don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it either, but there is the potential with some of this offshore flow. Then you can see the thermal trough here as we go through Friday morning. Now we go on into Friday night and Saturday morning. Again, the thermal trough kind of hanging right out over western Washington, Oregon, but then it starts to eject inland. Notice the low pressure goes inland. That's when that onshore flow is going to start kicking in here as that low pressure moves off to the east of the Cascade Crest. Pretty typical deal there as we get these marine pushes here after the thermal trough sets up along the coastline. It eventually shifts inland and brings that next marine push. So if we take a look at that, about 925 millibars, we've got the onshore flow still today. Friday. But you notice as we go through tonight, it starts to weaken and you start to turn it a bit northeasterly here across western Washington, Oregon. And then you can kind of see the easterlies coming through the gorge here and across some of the Puget Sound down the Fraser River Valley. And then we go on in towards Thursday, still that offshore flow continuing on through Friday. You can see the north winds down the coastline there also. And then we start to scroll off in towards this weekend, and you notice we start to turn things back onshore, and that's probably when we're going to start to cool things down. So we'll be watching that here closely. I'll show you a bunch of temperature maps for different locations here in a moment as well. Now, if we take a look at the fire smoke, so this is vertically integrated. This is all levels of the atmosphere. And if we scroll on in towards today, you can see we get a little bit of a break for some areas, a little bit of a break for eastern Washington, but not much of a break for portions of Oregon. And you can see then we start to reverse that flow back to offshore, and we start to introduce some of this more dense smoke even into western Washington and especially western Oregon as we go on in through about Thursday morning. You don't like to see this here, but we're just here to report the weather. I don't get to control it. Taking a look at the surface smoke now, that was all layers of the atmosphere. This is what you would be smelling at the surface. A lot of times you can get smoke aloft, but you don't smell it too much. But this is the surface smoke, and you can see we turn things offshore, and we're looking at some potentially dense smoke into southwest Washington and a lot of the Willamette Valley here as we go on in through tomorrow. So yeah, not good news there, but be prepared for it because some of this looks pretty dense for the Portland Metro, maybe down towards Salem and Eugene as well. So not a great sign there. Now taking a look at what is coming through the extended forecast. You can see the upper level low is right here, and we're looking at the European on the left and the GFS is on the right. So let's see what the models have to say. Short-term agreement, of course, a very good agreement on the big ridge, the ridge axis, all the way up into British Columbia as we go on into the end portion of this week. And then we start to weaken that ridge. It starts to move off to the east a little bit here. It looks like the GFS is a little bit quicker and just very weak, subtle system. Some onshore flow starts to show up as we go through the early portion of next week. These troughs are pretty typical for September, but it's definitely going to be a change from the ridge that we're going to be having as we go through the end of the week. And you can kind of see this trough trying to pivot somewhere along the west coast of North America, depending on who you believe. We'll be watching that on a day-by-day basis. Then we go off into the extended forecast a little bit, and you see the GFS tries to bounce a little bit of a ridge back here in the European. Not so much, a little bit more active out over the Gulf of Alaska. We'll see how that goes. And we scroll far enough out into the fantasy forecast. The GFS always has something crazy out there. It seems like look at 360 hours out. That would be a pretty substantial storm, but of course that is purely a fantasy forecast, and you can see the European is much weaker and much more believable. Now take a look at Seattle, Tacoma. Check it out, 73 for today. But look, where we are heading here for Thursday and Friday as we go on in towards the end of the week, and Saturday another fairly warm day. And then we start to drop things down as we return that onshore flow, which will in turn, of course, give western Washington and western Oregon a break from the fire smoke that is probably coming as we go through these next few days. Now look at Portland, 101 on Thursday. Look at Friday, 99. And this is subject to a little bit of adjustment here with some of that fire smoke into the area can wreak havoc with some of these temperatures. So, but it is likely it'll be fairly hot and potentially smoky as well. Tillamook Airport, look at all the way out to the Oregon coast. You want to get out there on Wednesday, Thursday, if you got some days off, that is the time to do it. Look at these temperatures. Friday, 81 degrees. Tri-Cities, look at this. If you're going inland here, up towards 100 degrees for, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 days, 95 plus. Looking at Astoria, check it out, 88 degrees all the way out towards the Oregon coast. And that is what happens when we get these thermal troughs moving up the coastline and we get this offshore flow. You can get really warm all the way out to the coastline because you really kick that marine influence back out over the ocean. You're not bringing that cooler air back in towards the land. Now taking a look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, very warm across the west. This goes through September 12th, and you can also see that above average precipitation there showing up. We'll see how that goes, and we'll break it down day by day. But I wanted to point this out as well, the U.S. monthly drought outlook. This is just for September. This was issued a few days ago on the 31st. You can see the Cascades are supposed to go through some improvement or drought removal, even some of the Oregon Cascades, but places east, drought looks like it's going to persist. And this one is a few days ago as well, and you can see some of eastern Washington should be improving, but there are some areas in the brown where the drought will be persisting as well. But anyway, hope you guys are enjoying these videos. Click like and subscribe. We will do this all again tomorrow. We'll see what's coming in the extended forecast, and I will talk to you guys then.